Hey guys, welcome back to another great episode of Pathways to Wealth. I'm your host, Chris Dunn. And in this episode, we're talking about something that I am super passionate about, which is reading, and specifically how to read books in about 20% of the time without learning how to speed read. So let's say that a book on average, a longer book, takes most people say 5 hours on average to finish. So if you take 10 books times 5 hours, that's 50 hours of reading. That's a long time. And what I aim to do is show you how to cut that down by about 80% and read 10 books in under 10 hours. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So the first thing I want to say is just how important reading is. You know, if your mission in life is to make more money, build more wealth, have more freedom, then reading and obtaining knowledge is really, really important. You know, there's a reason why guys like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates read for hours and hours. I think the last stat I heard was that Warren Buffett reads about 5 hours a day. And I've committed to reading about 2 or 3 hours a day, depending on how much time I have. And I basically, any free time that I have, instead of watching TV outside of NHL hockey games, which I'm just a huge fan of, but outside of that, like I'm constantly reading either books or blogs or articles or essays. And so this strategy that I'm going to show you is really for reading stuff that you want to learn and retain the knowledge. This isn't for fiction books like Harry Potter. You don't want to read a Harry Potter book in a few minutes. Like, you want to sit back and enjoy that, right? It's not like a romance novel that you're going to sit there and slowly read and enjoy on a Sunday afternoon. This is reading to obtain information. And again, it could be a book, it could be magazines, it could be a blog post, articles. But specifically, what I'm going to show you and the steps that I'm going to take you through in this episode are going to show you how to do that with books. And then in future episodes, I'll show you how I do that with other resources. And let me just tell you that you actually don't have to be brilliant to do this. And I want to tell you a little story. So in high school, I was either an A or an F student, meaning I either breezed through a class and practically taught the damn class, or I failed miserably. And in the 10th grade, I was really interested in psychology because I had just started my first business, which was a detailing business where I hired several of my friends and we were making good money, but I didn't really understand that much about adults. You know, I felt really young. I felt like an imposter. And I'm like, how do I deal with this mental stuff that I have going on? I'm like, ooh, psychology. I have to learn about psychology. So I went into a psychology class and borrowed a psychology book, basically found one and just kind of used it for a week. And I was so into this stuff that I read pretty much the entire book in a week. Now, a lot of my other classes suffered because of that, but the lesson here is I had a motivation for learning. I had a motivation for really wanting to understand psychology, and so I was able to get rid of all the other distractions and focus on what my mission was. And by the time I actually took the class in 12th grade, I had moved on. I was interested in other stuff, and so I actually got an F in the class, even though I knew exactly what the information was. My head was somewhere else. And that's why I think our school system has to change, but that's a topic for another episode. So the lesson of that story is you need a real desire to learn the material. You know, you can't just be learning out of obligation. If you're looking at a book and you're like, I'm really not into this probably isn't going to work for you. So what I would recommend is ask yourself, like, why am I interested in reading this? You know, think about how much your time is really worth and allow yourself to kind of buy into the idea that, you know, if you can cut your time down by 80%, what that's going to allow you to do and how much more money you can make, how much time you can save, and ultimately how much time that's going to free up for you to do other things. And if you're really into the subjects that you're reading, it's going to make this process really, really easy. So let's talk about step one, okay? This is called learning the main theme of a book. And this takes, on average, about 10 to 20 minutes max to do this. So learning the main theme is really exactly what it sounds like, is every book has a theme. It might be a self-help book. It might be a technical book about how to do something. Like my book is about how to trade Bitcoin. That's a very technical book. You have some books that are more stories. Like Digital Gold is a Bitcoin book that is just a story of the history of Bitcoin where you learn a lot from it. And as you guys saw in the last Pathways to Wealth episode, Lewis Howes stopped by and we did a great interview together. And he's actually finishing up a world tour for his book. And this made the New York Times bestseller list. So I'm going to use this as an example in this episode. And in step one, what you would want to do is go to Amazon and basically read the table of contents, the description of the book, and the most helpful reviews. That'll give you kind of an overview and a little bit of insight into what the theme is. So for this book, for Lewis's book, I want everybody to have a copy. Not only is Lewis a great guy, but I think this is a really, really good book. And to let Lewis know that you guys came from the Pathways to Wealth show, go to chrisdunn.com/great and buy this book. I highly recommend it, guys. I don't recommend books that I don't personally read, and I think this is a great place to start if you're trying to read more or improve your life or find more income sources, which is really what this podcast is all about. Helping you make more money, build wealth, and have more time freedom. And there's a lot of crossovers in this book. So let's go ahead and jump over to Amazon if you're watching this on a video. If you're listening to this on the podcast, just follow along. Okay, so if you go to chrisdunn.com/great, that's going to take you to the Amazon page for Lewis's book here. And one thing that I would recommend doing is start by reading just the description here. This will give you a good overview of what the book is all about. And then if you click here, most books you can actually kind of preview. And if you go to the table of contents, this will show you each chapter title. Again, this just takes a few seconds. And if you maybe click on one of these, you can kind of see how the book is laid out and how it reads. Now, after you've read the description and the table of contents, you're going to come down here to the reviews and just kind of see like what type of reviews does this book get. You can see over 90% 5 stars. This is excellent, 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 excellent. Anytime a book has maybe 50 to 75% 4 or 5 stars, that's a little concerning. But you can see over 96% of the stars are over 4 or 5 stars. And then what I like to do is just read the most helpful reviews. So these are typically sorted by most helpful. So you can see 45 out of 46 people found this review helpful. And a lot of times what people will do is they'll write kind of a summary of the book and what they got out of the book. And this is really key because a lot of times you'll get the main theme from that. Okay, so by that time, you should know the title and the subtitle of the book. You should know the title of all of the chapters and maybe read a page or two just to kind of get a feel for how the book reads. And then also read the reviews to see A, is it a good book? And B, kind of understand a summary from a reader's perspective. And what I like to do to take this to the next level is to do a YouTube and Google search for either the author's name or the title of the book. And what I'm looking for is interviews and summaries that either people wrote in a blog post or podcast interviews. And as an example, you can go back and watch me and Lewis's interview where he talks about the book, talks about a lot of the main themes in the book. So if you go to chrisdunn.com/010, that's for episode 10, so 010 for episode 10, you can actually watch an interview and read a little bit of a summary of the book that I put together. And that's just a good example of the type of quick content that you want to find on books that you're interested in reading. And you'll be amazed how much insight you'll get just by doing that. Because one thing I'll say about reading a book is nobody gets a trophy for reading a book front to back, every single word. That's not the goal of reading books. The goal of reading books is what? To get the knowledge, to get the information, to get the value out of the content in these pages, right? There's nothing inherently noble about reading a book from front to back. It might make you feel accomplished, but if you look at it at the end of the day, using the 80-20 principle, you want to use the best amount of time that you can to get the most amount of information out of the book. So what I like to do is if I'm watching an interview or a video on YouTube with the author or a summary, a lot of people are doing book summaries now, I will play the video at 1.5 to 2 times speed. So if it's a 15, 20-minute video, you can watch it in half of that time. So there you're saving time right there. And by that point, you've only invested maybe 10 to 20 minutes really getting and understanding the main theme of the book. So after step 1, after you understand the main theme of the book, if you decide that this is a book that you want to learn more about, because sometimes, in fact, about half of the time, I'll do step 1 with a book and go, okay, I got it. I really don't need to dive more into this, because a lot of books, guys, authors will write and they'll have an idea that's really maybe only good for one chapter or one blog post or one video, but because they want to make money, what they do is they expand it and they put stories and all this filler content to create a book. But the reality is that I would say about half of the books out there really shouldn't be books. They should just be an article or a blog post. But what you'll do through that discovery process is, let's say you look through 10 books, maybe half of those are worth actually buying and then going into step 2, which is the quick scan. And again, the quick scan really should only take about 15 to 20 minutes as well. So what is the quick scan? The first thing that you want to do is buy the book on Kindle or 2-day Amazon Prime shipment. Now, unless you want to drive to the bookstore and buy them in bulk, you can do that. But I'm a big fan of Kindle because you can sync up your reading locations. I actually read a lot on my iPhone, and you can also read on the Chrome extension, and you don't really have to buy a Kindle device, but you can if you want. But you can read a Kindle book in so many different locations. And a big benefit to that is what Kindle does is they save all of the popular highlights. So if there's a line or a chapter or a sentence in a book that's really popular and say a couple dozen or a few hundred people have highlighted that section, Kindle will actually put that in a specific section that you can go back and say, I just want to read all of the highlights that people found really, really good in this book. And then it's kind of like you pull the top 1% or 2% of that book out immediately. So right away, you're getting the best stuff in just a few minutes. And then again, what I'll do is I'll scan and reread the table of contents. And if I have a physical book, so we're using Lewis's as an example here, what I'll do is I will quickly flip through and read maybe the first page or so of each chapter. I'll also read all of the sub-headlines, any quotes, anything that kind of pops out on the page, anything that's not just long-form paragraph text. And some books are easier than others, and this is why I think the School of Greatness is a great one, because he has lists, he has chapter summaries, exercises. Those are things that you can just pull out and read and scan through very quickly. And you should be able to flip, if you have the physical book, flip front to back in less than maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes I do it in 5. And if you have the Kindle, it's just as easy. You just swipe. So I actually stop at this step with about 25% to 50% of the books that I buy, because after understanding the main theme in step 1 and then after doing the quick scan in step 2, I've gotten all the information that I need to invest and in that book. So sometimes I'll want to read more, but about a quarter to half of the books I get, I go, okay, that's good. I get it. I get the main points. I understand everything. On to the next point, right? Because again, your goal is not to get brownie points or a badge for saying I read an entire book. It's to get the information that you can use and apply in your life to do whatever your goals are. Okay, now step 3, this is called the deep dive. This is where you actually do what people refer to when they think about reading a book. It's where you dive deep and you read paragraphs and you really get into it. And the question that you want to start off with is this a book that you read front to back? So you start in the front and you read every chapter front to back? Or do you want to cherry pick chapters that you want to read and gain from first, and then decide if you want to come back and read the other ones later? What I like to do to speed things up is, if it's a book that's worth the money investing, I will actually download the audiobook from audible.com. And what I do is I'll play that back at 2 or 3 times speed, and I'll follow along reading with the audio. What that does is it dramatically increases retention, because you only remember a certain percentage of what you read, a certain percentage of what you see, a certain percentage of what you hear. And if you combine those, you're going to gain better retention. But what that's also going to do is it's going to keep you on track, because a lot of people, and I'm like terrible at this, is when people are reading. Have you ever read a whole page and you're scanning the page and then you stop and you go, oh my God, I was thinking about something else that entire time that I was reading that page, and then you have to go back and reread it? That happens to a lot of people, and the way to combat that is to have the audio playing, where you basically just follow along. So you're listening and you're reading, but it keeps you on pace. So if you're not a speed reader, or if you struggle to read fast, that's a great way to do it. It will help you increase the speed of reading. And I don't consider myself a super fast speed reader. I do follow some of the techniques where you kind of scan down a page and you read bulks of words at a time, but I don't consider myself a classic speed reader. I haven't invested the time to develop that skill, but the reason why is because I save so much time following my own process, where I literally chop off 80% of the time that it takes to read a batch of 10 or 12 books. So if you want to get a free trial of Audible, go to chrisdunn.com/listen, LISTEN. So chrisdunn.com/listen, and you'll actually get 2 books for free to decide if that's something that's helpful for you. I've gotten great feedback. A lot of people say, Chris, I tried it and I blew through a book in just an hour or 2. And other people say, yeah, it's not really for me. I like the quiet. I can't have any distractions. So I think it's worth testing out and seeing if it's something that can help you. So another trick that I use to read books quickly is, if you just want the meat and you want to kind of skip the fluff, what you can do is skip the stories. A lot of authors will invest a page or 2 or 3 of the actual meat of the content, and then they'll back it up with 1 to 4 stories that kind of reinforce what they told you. And I think that's good. I think people learn through stories. So if you really want to dive into it and you want to digest everything that you can about the book, read all the stories. But if you're like, look, I want to get through this quicker and I just want the meat, then skip the stories and move on to the next part. So if I'm reading and I go, okay, this is good stuff, I'm really digesting it, then I'm like, okay, he's going into stories and I can see there's like 4 or 5 pages of stories, I'll just jump to the next main point or the next sub header in that chapter. And again, don't feel guilty if you hop around or skip a chapter or quit reading the book. Again, the goal is not front to back reading every single book on the planet. It's to get as much information as you can to help you achieve your goals. And I actually only read about 20% of the books that I buy from front to back. Sometimes I'll read a few chapters. Sometimes I'll read most of the chapters, but I don't read every single book front to back because most books aren't worth that investment in the time. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a recap, and I want to show you 5 actionable steps for how to save 80% of your time. Okay, step 1 is go out and find 10 books that interest you. Okay, you could look at the New York Times bestseller list, go on Amazon, pick a category, look at the top 10 or 20 books, and then pick out 10. Don't do 3, don't do 20, do 10 that interest you. And then research the main theme for all of them at the same time. So block out an hour or two to go through and research 10 books and find out which ones you're interested in. And then choose 3 to 5 out of those 10 books for a quick scan. So you have the 10 books, you've done the theme research, you know kind of the high level point of the book, you know the reviews, you've seen some summaries, maybe some videos or some interviews for all those books. You'll actually know more than most people that buy a book by doing that first step of doing the theme research, because quite frankly, most people don't read the books they buy. So just by spending 5, 10, 15 minutes max on understanding the theme, you're going to have a ton of knowledge. And then out of those 10, the 3 to 5 that you buy to do a quick scan, buy them all at the same time. You don't have to read them all at the same time or keep reading after you do your theme research, but get all the books that you know what the theme is and you're still interested enough to do a quick scan. Buy them, take 15, 20 minutes to do your quick scan. Then go to step 4, which is choose 1 to 3 books on average. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 3 for a deep dive. That you go, okay, I've done the theme research, I've done the quick scan. This 1 book or these 3 books, maybe it's a little more. You go, I really think it's worth investing the time to do a deep dive and actually read these in the classical sense. And then what I would do after that is, once you've decided on the few books that you want to actually read, decide if you want to read them front to back or kind of skip around, and then block out some time to focus on 1 book. So choose 1 book, and what I like to do is block out about 90 minutes and then have the goal of reading that book in 90 minutes. Sometimes you'll do it quicker, sometimes you won't be anywhere close. But what that'll do is it will keep you motivated to read quickly and extract the information and not just fall asleep or get lazy and start daydreaming about something else, right? Again, this is reading for the sake of downloading information that you can use in your life. So let's look at the math of this, okay? So the old way, again, if we have 10 books, let's say you bought 10 books and you invested reading those books, slowly, all at the same pace for 5 hours on average each. That's 50 hours. That's over a full working week to read 10 books. But our new way, the Pathways to Wealth way of doing this, is you take 10 books times an average of 15 minutes for learning the main theme. That's about 2.5 hours. Okay, so you will learn the main theme of 10 great books that you've handpicked in about 2.5 hours. And then step 2 is you'll pick maybe 5, about half of those that you'll do the quick scan. So you'll actually buy those, and that on average will take about 15 minutes as well. So about a little over an hour. And then out of, let's say, the 1 to 3, let's go on the high end. Let's say you pick 3 out of those 10 that you're like, these are worth the investment of my time to do a deep dive. Then you invest on average about 90 minutes. Again, some will be less, some will be a little bit more, but really work at improving your speed of reading with the tricks that I taught you. And that will average about 4.5 hours for 3 books. Okay. And then the total time, you're looking at under 10 hours, maybe 7, 8, 9 hours, somewhere in there to read 10 books. So that is less than 20% of the time to read 10 books. Pretty cool, huh? So here's some final thoughts. Take action. Okay? Don't just listen to this and say, oh, that sounds great, and then move on with your day. Actually do it. Okay? And I would highly recommend, unless you know a book that you want right now, start with this book. Start with The School of Greatness. It's a great motivating book. It's an easy read. It's laid out in a way that I think you can get through this in 90 minutes if you choose this for one of your deep dives. And if you want to help Lewis out, and if you want Lewis to know that you guys are Pathways to Wealth listeners and subscribers, go to chrisdunn.com/great and get that book. It's a great book. And let me know how that works for you, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what you think of this process. Test it out. Actually do it. And if you have any books that you want to recommend, if you're watching this on the Chris Dunn TV YouTube channel, leave a comment below. If you are listening to this on the iTunes podcast, go ahead and make sure to subscribe to everything, but also leave us a rating and review and let me know what you thought of this episode. So thank you guys so much for listening. I really hope this adds a ton of value to your life. Just imagine what you can do if you read 10 books a month or 10 books a week. You know, let's say that maybe you hardly read at all. Maybe you read a couple of books a year. What happens? What do you think will happen to your life if you start reading 10 books a month or 10 books a week? It is possible. I just showed you with less than 10 hours you can read 10 books or gain the knowledge that you need out of 10 books. And hopefully this maybe had a paradigm shift for you where you go, look, I understand that I don't need to read books front to back. And if you've struggled with reading in the past, that might be why. Maybe you've tried to struggle through a book that really wasn't that great or really didn't deserve to be a full book. Or maybe, you were burnt out on the subject and you just needed to reinvigorate yourself and, find a new category or a new author that can really inspire you. So again, thank you guys so much. I will see you in the next episode. Don't forget to share this show with your friends. I have a mission of helping 100,000 people become financially free and achieve what we call true wealth. And that's what we're going to be talking about and really exploring in the future episodes. As you guys have seen with the interviews that we've put out, we're talking about real estate. We're talking about investing and trading. We're talking about entrepreneurship and just all the different ways that you can build wealth, create more income, and have more time freedom. Because at the end of the day, guys, that's really all that matters is the time that we have, because that asset is finite, it's always depleting, and money can't buy more of it. So think about that, guys. Go buy Lewis's book right now, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.